He called my daughter average. The word rolled off his tongue like chalk dust, dry, harmless to him, but heavy enough to choke me. It was a Tuesday afternoon, PTA meeting. Folding chairs squeaked, coffee cups clinked, and all I could think was how this man, with his smug half-smile and second-hand suit, had just labeled my baby like she was a test score instead of a person. My name's Helen. I'm 46 years old, and this is the story of how my daughter turned average into an Ivy League scholarship, and how silence became our loudest clapback. "Mrs. Harper," he'd said, tilting his glasses like that made him wise, "your daughter's doing fine. She's average. Nothing to worry about, but nothing exceptional either." Average. He said it twice, like he liked the sound of it. I remember glancing at my daughter, Maya, sitting beside me, fiddling with the strap of her backpack, trying not to look small. She was 12, too young to learn that sometimes the world doesn't even give you a chance to prove it wrong. I smiled, quietly, because that's what mothers do when their anger could burn a room down. They smile and file the match away for later. When we got in the car, Maya didn't speak. She just sat there staring out the window, watching the rain slide down like little gray highways. I let the silence breathe. Then I said, "You know, baby, average just means they don't know your story yet." Her lip trembled. "But he said I'll probably never make honors." I nodded. "He said a lot of things, didn't he?" She looked at me. "You don't believe him?" I chuckled. "Sweetheart, that man still uses a flip phone. I don't trust his judgment on anything." That made her laugh. And that laugh, that little watery, reluctant laugh, became my mission. I decided right there, in that old Toyota Camry smelling like cocoa butter and ambition, that nobody would ever make my baby feel small again. That night, while she slept, I sat at the kitchen table with her math homework spread out like a war map. Numbers, fractions, patterns, and one note from her teacher that read, "Needs consistent effort." I smiled at that too, because they never see effort until it wins trophies. By the next week, I'd rearranged my work schedule. I started waking up an hour earlier. I bought flashcards, practice tests, even joined one of those parents who tutor Facebook groups. Maya didn't know yet, but her mama was about to turn average into a campaign. Every evening after dinner, we'd sit side by side at the kitchen table. I'd say, "Show me what you learned." She'd roll her eyes, but then, halfway through, she'd start explaining things like a little professor, her hands moving, her confidence growing. And every time she got something right, I'd clap like, "We just won the lottery." Because when the world tries to shrink your child, your job is to make her too bright to ignore. 3 months later, the first test came back, a big red A at the top. She left it on the counter, pretending she didn't care. But I saw her glance at it 3 times before she left for school. That evening, I taped it to the refrigerator, and under it, I wrote, "From average to amazing, Part 1. The teacher didn't like that. Oh, he noticed. At the next meeting, he said, "Well, looks like Maya's improving. Must be a lucky streak." I said, "Funny thing about luck, it follows the ones who show up." He cleared his throat and changed the subject. But I caught that flicker in his eyes, the one that said he wasn't used to being challenged by women like me. By 8th grade, Maya was top 5 in her class. By 10th, she was running tutoring sessions for younger kids. And by senior year, she had 3 acceptance letters before Christmas: Harvard, Howard, and Stanford. I still remember that morning. She came running down the stairs, barefoot, letter in hand, screaming like the world had finally heard her name. "Mom," she yelled, waving the envelope. "They said yes." And all I could think about was that word, average, and how wrong it sounded echoing in that moment. But the story didn't stop there. See, revenge has a funny way of circling back. At the graduation ceremony, the same teacher was there, older, thinner, still adjusting those glasses like the world owed him clarity. He was presenting the Academic Excellence Award, and when he read the name Maya Harper, the auditorium erupted. He froze, looked up, and saw me in the front row, smiling the same quiet smile I'd given him years ago. Our eyes met. He nodded awkwardly. I just tilted my head, slow, respectful. The kind of nod that says, "You see it now, don't you?" After the ceremony, he approached us. "Maya," he said, "you've grown into an extraordinary young woman. You must be very proud, Mrs. Harper." I said, "Oh, I've been proud since day one. The world's just catching up." He laughed, nervous. "Well, I suppose every teacher's dream is to see a student surpass expectations." I smiled. "And sometimes a parent's dream is to watch the teacher learn something too." He didn't have much to say after that. A year later, Maya sent me a picture. She was on campus, standing under a red brick archway with her backpack and a smile that could light a stadium. Her caption read, "Average no more." I posted it on Facebook with just 3 words, "Quiet revenge complete." But here's the part I never told anyone, not even her. That teacher? He had a son in the same school system, a boy always praised as gifted, always first in line, always first in attention. And last summer, guess who showed up at Maya's graduation party? That same boy, now working part-time, trying to transfer colleges after dropping out his sophomore year. He congratulated her, told her how inspired he was. And when he left, I couldn't help but think, poetic justice doesn't always come with headlines. Sometimes it comes with handshakes. That night, Maya sat beside me on the porch. The cicadas were loud, the stars soft. She said, "You think he ever realized how wrong he was?" I said, "Baby, it's not our job to make people realize. It's our job to keep rising." She nodded, quiet. Then she leaned her head on my shoulder, and in that silence, I heard everything. Every late night, every flashcard, every tear, every whispered prayer. I whispered, "You did it." She smiled. "No, Mama, we did." Sometimes revenge isn't fire. Sometimes it's graduation caps in the air, scholarships in the mail, and mothers in the front row, smiling through tears because their daughters rewrote history without ever raising their voices. That's the kind of revenge that don't need applause, just peace. And peace, baby, is louder than any insult. 2 months after Maya's graduation, I found myself standing in the middle of a quiet, empty kitchen, the same one where we used to study fractions and cry over C's that felt heavier than F's. Now the counters were spotless, the refrigerator bare, and the only sound was the soft hum of the ceiling fan tracing memories in circles. That's the thing about victory. It doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes with quiet mornings where you realize the fight is finally over. Maya was already gone, off to campus, chasing sunlight and second chances. I still had her graduation tassel hanging from the rearview mirror, swinging every time I hit a pothole like a tiny flag of triumph. I'd drive past her old school sometimes, just to remind myself that we'd made it out of that building with our dignity intact. But one morning, while sipping coffee and scrolling through emails, I saw it. A subject line that made my stomach tighten. Upcoming PTA fundraiser, volunteers needed. And right beneath that, from Mr. Jenkins, principal. I laughed out loud. "Lord," I said to my mug, "these people really want me back?" I clicked it open. Turns out the teacher, yes, that teacher, had been promoted. New position, assistant principal, same tone, same smile in the newsletter photo, and I don't know what got into me that day. Maybe peace, maybe pettiness, but I decided to volunteer. The next week, I walked through those doors again, same hallways, same flickering fluorescent lights, same faint smell of hand sanitizer and lost dreams. Only this time, I wasn't the nervous mother clutching report cards. I was the woman who'd seen her child outgrow every limitation this place tried to set. "Mrs. Harper." I turned. It was the receptionist. Her tone had changed. Back then, it was polite pity. Now it was admiration. "Oh, everyone's so excited. You're joining the fundraiser committee," she gushed. Mr. Carter was saying just the other day how proud he is of Maya. Mr. Carter, the teacher. Proud. That word almost made me laugh again. He saw me before I saw him. Across the hallway, he froze mid-sentence with a clipboard in his hand. I could tell from his eyes he wasn't expecting me. "Mrs. Harper?" he said finally, walking over, his voice low. "It's good to see you." I smiled. "Is it?" He chuckled, awkward. "Of course. Maya must be doing great things." "She's adjusting," I said softly, making average look impossible. He winced, just slightly. But I didn't press. I didn't need to. The fundraiser was for underprivileged students, art supplies, books, after-school programs, the kind of work I loved. So I threw myself into it, same way I'd thrown myself into Maya's homework all those years ago. Before long, I was running the show, calling vendors, designing flyers, organizing parent volunteers. The PTA president started deferring to me in meetings, and the same teacher who once dismissed my daughter, he started asking me for advice. "Mrs. Harper, do you think this layout looks professional? Mrs. Harper, could you review the donation letter?" Every Mrs. Harper came with a tone I hadn't heard before, respect wrapped in regret. One afternoon, while setting up tables for the event, I overheard him talking to another teacher. He didn't see me. "She made me rethink how I speak to students," he said quietly. "I used to think being honest meant being blunt. Now I know it's about being careful with who you crush." That stopped me cold. For the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, just a strange kind of closure. Because sometimes you don't need to win the argument. You just need to live long enough for them to learn the lesson. The fundraiser was a success. We raised more than the school ever had before. By the end of the night, my feet were sore, my throat dry, but my heart full. As I was packing up, he approached again, holding 2 cups of punch. "Truce?" he said. I took one. "Wasn't aware we were at war." He smiled. "Fair point." We stood there in that empty gym, the banner behind us reading, "Building Futures Together." He looked at it, then at me. "I wish I'd seen her potential sooner," he said. "She was exceptional. Still is." I nodded. "She always was. You just didn't know how to measure it." He took that in, slow, quiet, and I could tell it landed, not like an insult, like truth. On the way home that night, the radio played an old gospel song Maya used to hum while studying. "What they meant for harm, God turned for good." I pulled over and just sat there, eyes wet, smiling at the irony of it all. 3 months later, I got a call. It was Maya. "Mom," she said, voice trembling, "guess who's teaching my leadership seminar next semester?" "Who?" "Mr. Carter's son. The one who always thought he was better than me. Small world, huh?" I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the phone. "Be polite," I said, "but don't you dare dim your shine." She grinned through the line. Oh, I planned to outshine him respectfully. I couldn't stop smiling, because that's when I realized this wasn't just my revenge story anymore. It was legacy. It was generational correction. Weeks turned into months, and the school started calling me regularly. Workshops, mentoring sessions, parent panels. Somewhere along the line, my name started meaning something there. One afternoon, the principal pulled me aside. "Mrs. Harper, you ever thought about working with us full-time? We could use more voices like yours." I blinked. "Me? Work here?" He nodded. "You've got the heart and the presence. The parents listen to you. The kids trust you. That's rare." I told him I'd think about it, but deep down, I already knew the answer. A month later, I walked through those same halls again, this time as director of parent engagement, my name on a brass plaque outside the office, my photo on the wall, and my story woven into every training manual for new teachers under the heading, "Every child is potential waiting to be seen." The first day on the job, I found myself standing in the same classroom where it all started. The desks were smaller than I remembered, the walls lined with motivational posters. believe you can. Dream big. Never settle. I smiled, because somewhere behind one of those slogans was a mother who refused to settle too. That evening I got a text from Maya. Maya, guess who got accepted into the mentorship program at NASA? Me? Girl, stop playing. Maya, dead serious. They called today. Average who? I laughed so hard I scared the janitor walking by. Later that night, I sat alone in my office, looking out the window at the empty parking lot. Sometimes the quiet feels like applause when you know what you've overcome. And for the first time in a long while, I felt something new. Not revenge, not pride, just peace. The kind of peace that whispers, "You did good." I closed my eyes and whispered back, "We both did." 3 months into my new job, I learned something every parent should know. Schools don't just teach children. They test parents, too. Patience, pride, forgiveness, all graded daily, all in pencil. And honey, I was learning fast. My office sat near the main hallway, just close enough to hear the morning bell, just far enough to feel like a ghost of my old self. Every time that buzzer rang, I thought of Maya at 12. That slouched walk, that tiny backpack, that worried glance before every test. I used to sit in my car back then, hands gripping the steering wheel, whispering prayers over her name. Now, I was the one signing the school letters that said, "We believe in every child." Irony has a sweet aftertaste when you've earned it. One afternoon, I was organizing files when I heard a knock on my door. "Come in," I called. A young mother stepped inside. Tired eyes, messy bun, uniform shirt still smelling like fryer grease. She held a wrinkled math worksheet like it was evidence in court. "They said my boy's not focusing," she started, "that he don't got what it takes to catch up." I nodded slowly. "Who said that?" "Mr. Carter." I almost smiled. History, it seemed, had a sense of humor. I invited her to sit down. "Tell me your son's name." "Deshaun. He's in 7th grade." "What do you think about him?" She blinked. "He's smart, just bored. He likes taking things apart. Fans, radios, remote controls." I smiled. "Then he's not behind. He's just ahead in a language they don't speak yet." She laughed through tired tears. "You sound like you've been through it." "Oh, baby," I said softly. "I built a house there." Later that week, I called Mr. Carter into my office. He looked nervous, like a student about to face detention. "Mrs. Harper," he said, clearing his throat. "Something wrong?" "Not wrong," I said, "just familiar." I slid the report across the desk. "Deshaun Johnson. Heard you said he wasn't focusing." "Well," he stammered, "his grades are slipping and he seems distracted." "Or maybe," I said, leaning in, "he's the kind of kid who needs to see why math matters before he memorizes it." He sighed. "I suppose you're right." I smiled. "Supposing's a start, believing's better." He nodded slowly, then left. And when I looked at the door after it closed, I swear I heard my younger self whisper, "That's for Maya." The next month, Deshaun's grades went up. He started volunteering in the robotics club. And at the next PTA meeting, his mama hugged me so hard I thought my ribs might crack. "You changed my boy's life," she said, crying. I shook my head. "Nah, sis. You just needed someone to say you were right." Around that same time, Maya came home for Thanksgiving break. Her hair was longer, her voice more sure. She'd grown into herself, soft edges, sharp mind. At dinner, between the macaroni and cornbread, she said, "Mom, they offered me a spot in a research group this summer. Paid." I nearly dropped my fork. Paid? Lord, that's the kind of average I prayed for. We laughed until tears ran down our faces, and then she grew quiet. "You ever think about what would have happened if we'd believed him?" she asked. I shook my head. Can't afford that kind of what if. Regret's just a bill for a story we never lived. That night, after she went to bed, I scrolled through my old emails, the ones from years ago with subject lines like, "Concern about Maya's progress," and "Parent Conference Follow-Up." I kept them all, not out of spite, out of remembrance, because sometimes you have to keep the receipts on your own resilience. The next week at school, I got invited to speak at an educational conference downtown. Topic: Reclaiming the Narrative. Parents as Partners, Not Problems. When I stepped on that stage, I wasn't nervous. I was ready. I told them about the word average, how it can bruise without leaving a mark, how some teachers hand it out like gumdrops, not realizing it sticks to a child's soul, and how one mama turned that word into a ladder. The room went quiet. A woman in the back whispered, "Amen." By the time I finished, they were standing, not because I was fancy, but because they knew, somewhere, they'd done the same thing. After the talk, a man approached me. He was tall, gray beard, sharp suit. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "I'm with the State Board of Education. Ever thought about consulting?" I blinked. Consulting? He smiled. "We need more voices like yours shaping teacher training. You make people listen." That night, I called Maya. "Baby," I said, "you sitting down?" She laughed. "Why, you buy another billboard for my GPA. Not yet, but your mama might just be going statewide." She screamed through the phone, "Mom, that's huge!" I grinned. "Guess we're both graduates now." Weeks later, my first workshop took place in a district 3 towns over. I opened with the same story: the word average, the car ride, the promise. By the end, teachers were wiping their eyes, writing notes. One of them came up after, whispering, "I said that word last week to a student named Zuri. I didn't mean harm." I touched her shoulder. "Then start by meaning better." One morning, back at school, I found a letter in my inbox. No name on it, just a folded piece of lined paper. Inside, it read, "Dear Mrs. Harper, my mom said you helped her friend Deshawn. I don't like school much either, but I like drawing cars. Maybe you can show me how to make that a job one day." Jalen, 6th grade. I sat there a long time, because that letter was proof. The ripples were real. You fix one broken perception, and the echo reaches children you've never met. That night, I drove home with the windows down. The air smelled like rain and redemption, and I realized revenge had changed its shape again. It wasn't about proving anyone wrong anymore. It was about helping every child prove themselves right. A few weeks later, I was invited to the district gala, Educator Appreciation Night. Mr. Carter was there too, this time with his wife. When they called my name for the Community Impact Award, I stood at that podium and said, "Some years ago, someone told me my daughter was average. Tonight, I dedicate this award to every child who was ever labeled less than what they are. You are not average. You are unfinished brilliance." The crowd stood again, and when I stepped down, I saw him in the corner, clapping, eyes glassy, humbled. He mouthed, "You were right." I nodded, because he wasn't just talking about Maya anymore. He was talking about himself, too. Later that night, Maya texted me, "Maya, heard about your award. You're trending on teacher Twitter." Me, "Lord, let me log off before I start replying with Bible verses." Maya, "Mom, seriously, you're changing things. I'm proud of you." Me, "And I'm proud of you for being the reason I started." That's when it hit me. This wasn't the end of our story. This was just another beginning. Because when a Black mother turns pain into purpose, the whole system starts shaking, quietly but permanently. And baby, once the system shakes, it never settles the same again. When you start changing systems, people either clap for you or question your place in the room. And baby, when you're a Black woman in a position that used to dismiss you, the applause always sounds a little suspicious. That's what I learned my first month consulting for the state board. The meeting was in a high-rise downtown, glass walls, skyline views, and coffee machines that cost more than my first car. They'd flown in educators from across the region, suits, blazers, buzzwords flying like paper airplanes, equity, innovation, accountability. I just sat there, quiet, because I've learned that when people talk too pretty, it's usually to hide something ugly. Mrs. Harper, the chairwoman said, we'd love for you to share your experience. Parent to professional, grassroots to boardroom. I smiled. You sure? My version don't come with corporate filters. She laughed politely, like she didn't know whether to nod or pray, so I told the truth. I'm not here to make the system feel good. I'm here because somewhere in a classroom right now, another child is being called average, and I refuse to let that word live long enough to destroy another dream. Silence, then slow clapping, then real clapping, the kind that means something shifted, even if just a little. After the session, a younger teacher approached me. White woman, nervous smile, hands shaking around her notepad. Mrs. Harper, she said, can I ask you something personal? Sure, baby, go ahead. How do you forgive yourself when you realize you were part of the problem? Her voice cracked on forgive. I took her hand. You start by changing the way you speak to kids tomorrow. That's the only apology they'll believe. She nodded, crying. That's when I knew my story wasn't revenge anymore. It was medicine. That night, I walked back to my car, heels clicking against marble floors, thinking about how far I'd come from the folding chairs and church bake sales. From fighting for one little girl's confidence to training people who held entire systems in their hands. It didn't feel like luck. It felt like calling. 2 weeks later, I got an email. Subject line, Keynote Invitation, National Education Forum. At first, I thought it was spam. Then I saw the signature. Dr. William Harris, U.S. Department of Education. I almost dropped my phone. They wanted me to speak. National stage. Broadcasted live. I laughed out loud, sitting at my kitchen table in a robe and satin bonnet. Maya, I yelled, pack your pearls, your mama's going to Washington. On the flight there, I looked out the window, clouds rolling like soft mountains, and thought about how life has a funny rhythm. Some people move from glory to glory. I move from gossip to graduation, from insult to invitation, and both paths work if you keep walking. The conference was huge. Thousands of teachers, cameras, reporters. They introduced me as Helen Harper, mother, advocate, and changemaker. When I walked onto that stage, I could feel the energy in the air, electric but respectful. I looked at the crowd and smiled. I'm not a celebrity, I said. I'm just a mother who got tired of watching potential die in silence. Then I told them the story again. The word average, the insult, the rebuild, the redemption. But this time, I added something new. Revenge is temporary, I said. Legacy is permanent. One makes you feel better, the other makes you matter. You could have heard a pin drop. Afterward, they handed me a plaque, gold letters, heavy wood, for transforming pain into purpose and purpose into policy. I smiled for the cameras, but inside I was thinking, if my grandma Cora could see me now, she'd be shouting through the roof tiles. When I got home, Maya was waiting with flowers. She'd driven 3 hours just to surprise me. She stood in the doorway, smiling like sunlight. You did it, Mama. I hugged her tight. We did it, baby. She looked around the house, grinning. Feels smaller, she said. That's 'cause we've outgrown it, I said. That weekend, we sat on the porch, eating peach cobbler straight from the pan. She leaned over and said, You ever think about writing a book? I laughed. Who'd read it? Everyone who ever got underestimated, she said. Start with the title, Average No More. I stared at her a long time, then nodded. Maybe I will. 2 months later, I started jotting notes between meetings, stories, lessons, little lines from old prayers. At first, it was just for me, a way to process everything. But by the time I hit page 60, I realized it wasn't just a story. It was a blueprint for mothers, for daughters, for anyone who'd ever been told you can't. One evening, while I was revising Chapter 3, Maya FaceTimed me from her dorm. Her face lit up the whole screen. Guess who got published in the University Journal, she said. Who? I teased. Me, Mama, my paper on mentorship got selected for print. I clapped like a fool, right there in my bonnet and robe again. Then she added, "I quoted you, you know." "Quoted me?" She smiled. "That thing you always say. Average is just potential that's still resting." My throat tightened, because that line, that belief, was now living in print, permanent, passed down. A few months later, my book got picked up by a small publishing house. The advance wasn't much, but the message was priceless. At the launch, people lined up with tears in their eyes saying things like, "You told my story, and now I see my child differently." One woman whispered, "You saved my faith in motherhood." And I thought, God, this was the plan all along. That night, I got home, kicked off my heels, and found an old folder buried in a drawer. Inside was that first test paper, Maya's A, with the fridge magnet still attached, the one that started it all. I hung it on the wall above my desk, because every movement begins with a moment that hurt enough to demand healing. The next morning, the phone rang. "Mrs. Harper?" "Yes? This is Mr. Carter." For a second, I thought I misheard. His voice was slower now, softer. "I read your book," he said. "I wanted to thank you." I sat down. He continued. "My granddaughter struggled this year. I caught myself almost saying that word again. Then I remembered your story. So instead, I told her, 'You're still unfolding.'" Silence. Then he said, "You changed the way I teach, even at home." I closed my eyes, smiling. "Thank you for telling me that," I whispered. "That's the real graduation right there." After we hung up, I looked at the morning light pouring through my window. It hit the Average No More book cover just right, gold shimmer, soft reflection, and I thought, maybe revenge is just the first draft of purpose. I used to think the sweetest sound in the world was my daughter's laughter. Now I know it's the sound of purpose catching its breath, the quiet hum that fills a room after your name gets called for something you earned twice over. The year after the book came out, everything changed. Book tours, panels, podcasts. My inbox looked like a war zone of hope. Mothers, teachers, even students writing from every corner of the country. My teacher said I wasn't smart enough for AP classes until I showed her your story. My mom read your book and cried all night. Now she sits with me when I study. I used to think average was all I'd ever be. Every message was a mirror, reflecting back 1,000 versions of Maya and me. But behind all that success, I still had moments where the silence got loud, where I'd sit in my car before a speech, hands trembling, on the steering wheel whispering, "Lord, keep me humble enough to remember the kitchen table that started this." Because fame, even the good kind, can make you forget what it felt like to be small. And I never wanted to lose that ache, the one that built me. One morning, while packing for another conference, I got a call from Maya. Her voice sounded tired but proud. "Mom, I just finished my first semester as a research lead." "Already? Girl, you better slow down before NASA tries to claim you." She laughed, then paused. "Mom, remember when that teacher called me average?" Lord, how could I forget? "Well," she said, "guess who emailed me last night asking if I'd come back to speak at the school's career day?" My jaw dropped. "You're kidding." "Nope," he said, and I quote, "Our students could benefit from your journey." "Oh, they could, huh?" I chuckled. "Baby, that's not an invitation. That's redemption knocking." Career day came 2 weeks later. I took off work to drive her there, not because she needed me, but because I needed to see it with my own eyes. She walked through those doors like she owned the building. And maybe, in a way, she did. When she got to the classroom, he was there. Older, slower, humility hanging off him like an oversized coat. "Maya," he said, smiling, "I'm honored you accepted the invitation." She smiled back. Wouldn't miss it for the world. Then she turned to the class and began. "When I was your age, someone told me I was average. That word stuck. until I decided to outgrow it. I stood in the back trying not to cry as the room went still. Every kid sat up straighter, every eye fixed on her like she was light itself. She talked about study habits, about faith, about failure not being final. And when she finished, the whole class clapped like it was graduation all over again. Afterward, he approached me. "Mrs. Harper," he said, "you raised quite the woman." I smiled. "No, sir, I released her. The world did the raising after that." He nodded, then sighed. "You know, when I called her average, I thought I was being honest. Now I see I was just being lazy." I met his eyes. "Growth looks good on you." He chuckled softly. "Took me long enough." That night, Maya and I stopped by the diner we used to go to after parent-teacher meetings. Same red booths, same lemon meringue pie that always tasted like hope and sugar. She said, "You think he really changed?" I took a sip of my coffee. "I think you were his lesson." She smiled. "Then I guess we both graduated." A few weeks later, my book hit the bestseller list. Not the big one, but the one that matters. Books that changed classrooms. Teachers started using it as part of their curriculum. I'd walk into schools and see posters that said, "Never call potential average." It was surreal, seeing my pain turned into lesson plans. Every time I saw it, I whispered, "Thank you, God. You really knew what you were doing." Then came the email that nearly stopped my heart. Subject, White House Education Summit. Keynote invitation. I read it 3 times. Then I laughed until I cried, because if that wasn't full circle, I don't know what is. The morning of the summit, I stood in front of the mirror wearing a soft gray suit. Maya called me on video wearing her own blazer. "Matching now, huh?" she teased. I grinned. Like mother, like miracle. She said, "Mom, I'm proud of you." I said, "I'm proud of us." The room was grand. Gold trim, velvet chairs, chandeliers older than my entire family line. When they announced my name, I took a breath that felt like the end of one story and the beginning of another. "I used to sit in classrooms where my daughter's worth was written in red ink," I began. "Now I stand here to remind the world, no test can measure destiny." They clapped, but I kept going. "Don't you dare call a seed average before it's bloomed. Don't you dare label a child who's still learning how to believe in themselves, because potential doesn't look perfect. It looks patient." The applause thundered. Some people stood, a few cried. And me? I just smiled and whispered under my breath, "You see this, Maya? We did it." Afterward, a young intern came up, notebook in hand. "Mrs. Harper," she said, "I grew up hearing that same word. Now I'm the first in my family to work in D.C. I hugged her. "Then you just made my whole trip worth it." When I got home that night, the porch light flickered. The same one I used to fix every winter. I sat on the steps, heels off, plaque in my lap, and I thought about that rainy Tuesday all those years ago. The classroom, the smirk, the word. Funny how one moment can build an entire lifetime of purpose. The next morning, I found a note taped to my front door. It was from the mailman, or so I thought. But when I looked closer, it was from a neighbor's daughter, high school senior, name signed, Amara. "Mrs. Harper, I read your book for my senior project. I used to think I was average too. But now I know. I'm still unfolding." I smiled so wide it hurt, because that word, unfolding, was spreading like wildfire, soft and sacred. That weekend, I visited Maya at her lab. She showed me a small project, solar panels for underserved schools. She said, "You know, Mama, this is my revenge, not a clapback, a contribution." I laughed. "Well, you get that honest." Then she looked up, eyes glistening. "You ever get tired, Mom?" "All the time," I said, "but tired don't mean done." We stood there, surrounded by machines and blueprints, both of us products of defiance turned divine. And in that hum of electricity, I realized we weren't chasing revenge anymore. We were building restoration. Because some stories don't end with payback. They end with peace that echoes. And baby, that echo, that's legacy. Peace changes a woman's walk. Not pride, not money, peace. That deep bone-level quiet that comes when you stop needing the world to clap to know you've done something holy. And baby, by the time Maya turned 24, peace had become my perfume. Life slowed down, but in the best way. I was still consulting, still speaking, still mentoring young mothers. But now, I took my time. Morning coffee tasted richer. Evening silence felt earned. I spent my weekends gardening, tomatoes, collard greens, and sunflowers that seemed to look back at me like, "We remember where you started." Sometimes I'd get calls from old schools asking for workshops. Other times, messages from strangers, parents who'd read the book or seen the summit speech. But one message stood out. Subject line, "Remember me?" It was from Mrs. Lawson, Maya's old guidance counselor, the one who used to suggest trade school because college might be too much pressure. Her email said, "Mrs. Harper, I owe you and Maya an apology. I was wrong. I've been using your story in my counselor training. We've changed our approach because of it. I hope you'll visit sometime." I read it twice, then 3 times, then just sat there smiling. See, forgiveness doesn't mean pretending it didn't happen. It means living so well they have to learn from it. A month later, I did visit. The office looked different, brighter, warmer, new posters on the wall. Every student is a story in progress. She hugged me when I walked in. "Mrs. Harper, you look amazing." I laughed. "Peace looks good on everybody." We talked for an hour. By the end, she asked if I'd join a new mentorship initiative, Voices of Mothers, a program for women to share their stories with schools across the state. I said yes before she could even finish her sentence. That's how I met Tanya, one of the first mothers in the program, single mom, 3 kids, working nights. Her oldest, Deja, was failing algebra and ready to drop out. When I met her, Tanya said, "I tried everything, Ms. Harper, tutors, church, even threats." I smiled. "Baby, you don't fix fear with more fear. You fix it with faith." She sighed. "Faith ain't been paying bills lately." I nodded. "No, but it keeps you from quitting before the blessing comes due." We started meeting every Friday. Coffee, notebooks, hope. She'd cry, I'd listen. She'd doubt, I'd remind her. Average is just a word lazy folks use when they run out of imagination. After a few months, Deja started smiling again. Then she brought home her first B, then an A, then an acceptance letter from a community college. When Tanya showed me, she whispered, "You were right." I said, "No, baby, you were. You just needed someone to say it out loud first." That program exploded. Within a year, there were chapters in 5 states. Every mother had a story, and every story became a spark. The media started calling it the Harper effect. I hated that name because it wasn't me. It was all of us, the women who refused to let other people write our children's endings. One afternoon, Maya came home for the holidays. We sat in the living room, photo albums spread out like testimony. She pointed at an old picture, her in pigtails, me in scrubs from my hospital job. "Look at us," she laughed. "You were exhausted and I was pretending to be asleep." "Girl," I said, "I was praying you'd pass spelling." We both cracked up. Then she got quiet. "Mom, you ever think about what would have happened if we'd never met Mr. Carter?" I leaned back. "All the time. But you know what? Some storms come just to wash the path clean." She smiled. "Maybe he was the rain." "Exactly, and we learned how to grow in it." That night, I got a text from Deja. "Deja, got accepted to transfer next year. Engineering major. You were right about the math." Me, "Told you, baby. Numbers just need someone to believe in them." I stared at the message a long time, tears slipping down before I even noticed, because every success like hers felt like another prayer answered. One I didn't even remember praying. Months later, the Voices of Mothers Network was invited to a national convention. Hundreds of women, stories that could fill oceans, and I was chosen to close the ceremony. When I walked on that stage, I didn't bring a speech, just my story and my daughter's name. I used to sit in classrooms where people thought power wore suits, I began, but I've learned it wears aprons too, and bonnets, and calloused hands, and late-night worry. The crowd murmured, some wiping tears. I continued, every time a mother refuses to accept average, heaven takes note. And maybe, just maybe, that's how change really begins. Not in policies, but in kitchens where love becomes strategy. They stood, every single one of them. Afterward, an older woman came up, cane in hand. She said, "Baby, I'm 81, raised 6 children. I thought my days of teaching were over till I heard you speak. I got grandbabies now, and I'm going to start again." I hugged her tight. That's what I'm talking about. Legacy never retires. When I got home, I sat at my desk, pulled out a blank journal, and wrote at the top, "Seeds." I didn't know it then, but that word would become my next book. A year later, Seeds. How Ordinary Women Grow Extraordinary Change became a bestseller, too. And you know what the first page said? Dedicated to every child ever called average. May your roots grow deep enough to outlive the label. Maya came to the book signing in a navy suit, confident, glowing, whole. She whispered, "You're unstoppable now." I smiled. "So are you." The photographer snapped a picture just then. Mother and daughter, same smile, same strength. They used it for the magazine feature later that year. Headline, "From Average to Advocate, the Harpers Who Changed the Classroom." That night, sitting on the porch under a soft spring moon, I thought about all the women I'd met, all the daughters I'd seen rise, the laughter, the tears, the quiet defiance. It hit me. We weren't just rewriting education. We were rewriting expectation, because for every teacher who said average, there was now a mother who said not my child, and together we made sure the world heard it. It's funny how full circle feels, not like an ending, but like a mirror. Every time life brought me back to the start, I didn't see the same woman. I saw proof that pain grows fruit if you water it with purpose. 2 years after Seeds came out, Maya graduated from grad school, valedictorian, published researcher, featured in a magazine called Women Who Build Tomorrow. I sat in the front row that day, floral dress, heels too high, tears already falling before they even said her name. When she walked across that stage, I swear time slowed down, like even heaven wanted to watch. The dean said, "Dr. Maya Harper," and I lost it. Because right there, in that echoing auditorium, I saw every night at the kitchen table, every tear she hid from me, every flashcard, every prayer. And I realized we hadn't just beat a label, we'd built a legacy. After the ceremony, she ran into my arms. "Mama," she said, laughing and crying at the same time, "we did it." I whispered, "You did it, baby. You became the woman I was still learning to be." We stood there for a long time, both too full for words. And for the first time since that PTA meeting years ago, I felt like the universe finally exhaled. A month later, Maya got a job offer, lead researcher for a national education initiative focused on STEM programs for girls of color. When she told me, she was so calm. "Mom, they said I'd be overseeing school outreach in 20 districts. I froze mid-coffee sip. 20? Girl, you gonna be everybody's favorite scientist auntie. She laughed. "You think I'm ready?" I smiled. "You were born ready. They just catching up." That summer, I got invited to her first big presentation. Same city where I'd given my first keynote years before. Different building, same fight. When she walked up to that podium, I felt something shift in the room. The same quiet power that used to make even teachers lean forward when I spoke. Now it was her turn. She said, "When I was 12, a teacher told me I was average. My mother told me I was divine. Turns out she was right." The audience went wild, cameras flashing, people standing, and I sat there, hands clasped, whispering, "Thank you, Lord." You let me live long enough to see this harvest." Later, after the conference, she found me in the lobby. Her eyes glistened. "Mom, I quoted you on stage." I laughed. "Girl, you've been quoting me since kindergarten." She smiled. "No, I mean it. Every word I said, that was you." I shook my head. "Nah, baby, that was us." But peace, like seasons, still tests you. Because every story, no matter how triumphant, has one more trial waiting around the corner. That winter, I got sick. Not the kind that passes with rest, the kind that makes you stare at the medicine bottles too long and whisper, "Not now, Lord, not yet." Maya rushed home from work. She cooked, she cleaned, she prayed over me, and one night when the pain was bad, she sat at my bedside and said, "You're not going anywhere. I need you." I smiled weakly. "Baby, you already have everything I ever wanted to give you." Her voice cracked. "Don't talk like that." I took her hand. "Then listen like this. I'm proud of you, not because of what you became, but because of who you stayed." She laid her head on my arm and cried like she used to when she scraped her knee. And I realized I wasn't scared of leaving. I was scared of her thinking I was done. Months passed. Treatment, recovery, faith, slow but steady. Some mornings I couldn't move much, but I'd sit by the window watching the sun crawl across the floor, whispering, "Still here." And that's when Maya started writing her own book. She called it Beyond Average, a collection of stories from girls in her program, their fears, their triumphs, their brilliance. One night she said, "Mom, I want to dedicate it to you." I smiled. "Dedicate it to yourself, baby. I just showed you the map. You walked the miles." She shook her head. "You built the road." The book came out 6 months later. It hit #1 in its category within a week. And when she gave me the first printed copy, I saw the dedication page, "To my mother, Helen Harper, who turned an insult into an institution. You taught me that average is just another word for undiscovered." I didn't even try to hold the tears back. I just held her hand and whispered, "Now you see what legacy feels like." That same year, our foundation launched the Harper Initiative, scholarships, mentorship programs, and parent training for families like ours. The tagline read, "From labeled to limitless." We held our first gala downtown. Lights, music, Black excellence in every direction. And guess who walked in as a surprise guest? Mr. Carter. Older now, cane in hand, humility still sitting on his shoulders. He came up to me slow, smiled, and said, "I saw the flyer. I wanted to see it for myself." I nodded. "Well, here we are." He looked around at the crowd, students, parents, educators, and said, "You were right. Words do grow roots." I smiled softly. They always did. You just had to plant better ones. Maya joined us, graceful and glowing. He turned to her and said, "I'm sorry, Maya. Truly, you deserved better." She nodded. "Thank you. But I got the teacher I needed. She just wasn't in the classroom." We all stood there a moment. No tension, no bitterness, just closure. And when he left, I whispered to her, "That right there is generational healing." She smiled. "Feels lighter, doesn't it?" I said, "like exhaling after a long drive." Later that night, as guests mingled and music played, I stood near the balcony overlooking the city lights. Maya joined me, holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. She raised hers. "To average." I frowned, laughing. To what? To the word that built an empire. We clinked glasses, both laughing until the music drowned us out. When I got home, I sat at my desk and opened an old folder again, the one that held Maya's first A, her Harvard letter, and my first speech draft. I added one more paper to it, the gala program with our foundation's name in gold letters. Then I whispered, "We did it." Not loud, just enough for the house to hear, because that's what legacy really is. Not noise, not fame, not even revenge. It's the quiet proof that you changed the air in every room you ever entered. And for me, that's more than enough. The older I get, the quieter my victories sound. Not because they're smaller, but because peace doesn't need an audience. It's been 10 years since Maya graduated. She runs our foundation now, polished, brilliant, calm in the way I never was at her age. Sometimes I watch her on TV interviews and catch pieces of my younger self in her tone, her posture, her steady confidence. Dr. Harper, they call her. I just smile and whisper, "That's my baby." We still live close. Every Sunday she brings over groceries I didn't ask for. Every time I pretend to fuss about it, "Girl, you think I don't know how to grocery shop?" She laughs. "You earned the right to never step foot in a supermarket again." And maybe she's right, but I still go sometimes, just to see the faces of mothers with tired eyes and full hearts. They recognize me sometimes, whispering, "Aren't you the woman from that video?" I nod. "Yes, ma'am." And they smile like they already know the rest of the story. The average story has gone viral a dozen times now. It's been remixed, quoted, even turned into classroom skits. But every time I hear it, it feels new again. Because somewhere, another mother is hearing her own reflection in my voice, and that's worth every sleepless night it took to get here. One afternoon, Maya called me. Her voice was soft, thoughtful. "Mom, do you ever feel like you're running out of firsts?" I laughed. "Baby, I'm just grateful I ran it all." She sighed. "Sometimes I think about having a family, but I'm scared. What if I can't be what you were for me?" I smiled. "You'll be better, because you'll raise them with both our lessons." She paused. "I still remember that day he called me average." I said, "Good. Never forget it. Not for bitterness, but for measurement." "Measurement? Every blessing since that day is proof of how far you've come. Keep it as a ruler, not a scar." The next morning, she sent me a photo, a sticky note on her mirror. It read, "Ruler, not scar." Under it, a heart. A few weeks later, I was asked to give one last speech before retiring from public life. Lifetime Achievement in Education Reform, big title. But I told Maya, it's just another kitchen table story dressed up in heels. She helped me write the slides. We spent the whole night laughing, reminiscing, editing between cups of coffee. And when she fell asleep on the couch, I looked at her. Peaceful, strong, unshaken. That's when I realized she wasn't my legacy anymore. She was the continuation. The ceremony took place in Atlanta. Grand ballroom, hundreds of educators, parents, community leaders. When they called my name, I didn't walk fast. I took my time. Let the room breathe me in. I started the speech the same way I always did. He called my daughter average. My coffee went cold before my tears did. And that was the day I started buying his building. The audience laughed softly, but then they quieted, because they knew what came next wasn't just a story, it was a testimony. I told them about Maya's journey, about the foundation, about forgiveness. And then I said, this isn't about revenge. This is about redemption. I didn't want him to feel small. I wanted my daughter to feel infinite. Silence. Then applause, then the sound of chairs scraping back as people stood, one by one. After the ceremony, a young teacher approached me, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Mrs. Harper," she said, "I used to think I was the problem, that maybe I expected too much from my students, but after hearing you, I realized I was expecting too little." I hugged her tight. "That's the real revolution, baby, expecting more out of love, not out of judgment." When I got home that night, I sat by the window. The city hummed below, but my heart was quiet. I thought of every stage I'd stood on, every room I'd walked through, every label I'd outlived, and I whispered to the dark, "We did good." A week later, Maya surprised me again. She took me to the old school, the one where it all began, but this time, the building looked different, renovated, painted, fresh. Out front stood a bronze plaque. At first I thought it was a dedication to some local donor, but when I got closer, my knees nearly gave out. The Helen Harper Learning Center. Below it, dedicated to every child once called average. I covered my mouth, tears already, spilling. Maya, you didn't... She smiled through her own tears. The board did. I just made sure they spelled your name right. I touched the plaque, cold and solid beneath my fingers. It felt like the universe itself had signed a thank you note. We walked the halls together. New paint, new faces, same spirit. In one classroom, a girl raised her hand and said, "Dr. Harper, how do you know when you're special?" Maya smiled. "When you stop asking for permission to be." I turned away, trying to hide the tears again, because that right there, that answer, was worth every sleepless night, every insult, every doubt. That evening, we stood outside as the sun dipped behind the building. Maya asked, "You ever think about what's next?" I smiled. "Honey, next is whatever peace decides." She grinned. "You think you'll ever stop telling the story?" I looked up at the sky, pink and gold. "No," I said softly, "because it's still happening." The following spring, I planted sunflowers in the backyard. I told myself I'd stop traveling, stop chasing, stop speaking. But every time a letter came in from a mother saying, "Your story saved my child," I knew retirement was a rumor I'd never keep. And that's okay, because some callings don't retire. They just change addresses. Now, when I sit on my porch in the evening light, I watch the neighborhood kids run by, braids flying, laughter echoing through the air. Sometimes they wave. "Hi, Miss Helen," I wave back. "Hey, baby, stay brilliant." And in that small moment, I see 1,000 possibilities running past my fence line, free, loud, unashamed. That's what we fought for. Not applause, not titles, just freedom. Last week, Maya dropped by unannounced, her hair streaked with a little silver now, her smile still that same soft defiance. She brought me a small gift, a framed photo of the plaque, surrounded by quotes from letters the foundation had received. At the bottom, in her handwriting, it read, "Every label can become a legacy if you let love rewrite it." I held her hand, eyes full, heart full. "Baby," I said, "you took my story and made it immortal." She squeezed my hand. "No, Mama, you made it believable." That night, after she left, I sat in my chair by the window. The air was warm, the cicadas singing their eternal song, and I whispered a little prayer, not for strength, not for success, but for gratitude, because I had lived long enough to see the seed bloom, long enough to see the label die, long enough to hear my own echo carried in another woman's voice. "If you were in my shoes," I'd always ask at the end of my videos, "what would you have done?" Now, I think I know the answer. I'd do it all again. Every heartbreak, every sleepless night, every kitchen table prayer, because all of it led here, to peace, to purpose, to proof. And if you've been called, average too, let me tell you something before I go. You're not behind. You're just unfolding. And when your bloom finally comes, baby, it'll make the world remember your name. If you were in my shoes, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.